Hello, and welcome to the League of Women Voters of Portland Voter Forum for May 20th, 2025, the special election for ballot measure 26259, the Portland Public School Bond. I'm Linda Mather, a member of the League of Women Voters of Portland, and I will be moderating this forum. The League is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to making democracy work. We believe democracy works best when voters are informed about issues and engaged in their communities. We're presenting this forum to give Portland voters the opportunity to learn more about this proposal. The Multnomah County Voters Pamphlet on page 80 describes the measure as one which authorizes up to $1.83 billion in principal amount of general obligation bonds for facilities and education investments. Voters who live in the Portland School District, which is about 67% of the voters in the county, will be able to vote on this measure. We're grateful for support from the Carol and Velma Sailing Foundation, the League of Women Voters Education Fund, the WISE Foundation, and our media partner, Metro East Community Media. We've invited representatives from groups supporting and opposing this bond to present and discuss their group's points of view in this forum. Representing the proponents are Portland School District Board member Christy Splitt. Representing those opposed to the bond is John Charles, President and CEO of Cascade Policy Institute here in Portland. Welcome to you both, and thank you very much for participating. Some of the guidelines. Each of you will give an opening statement of about 2 minutes. Then you will be asked questions in alternating order. You will have 60 seconds to answer each question. And you have not, they're going to be a surprise. I haven't told you about the questions yet. You will also have a 2-minute closing. And we've asked you please to stick to these time limits, and you've all agreed to do so. So, I think we're ready to begin, and Ms. Splitt, you'll start us off with the first opening statement.
Great. Thank you so much, Linda. Yes, I am honored to be here today to talk about the Portland School Bond. I believe that a great city needs great schools. Portland has, on average, some of the oldest buildings of any other school district in the country. And we have a lot of work to do to get them modernized and to deal with deferred maintenance, seismic upgrades, and other aspects of improving our schools that a bond can take care of. The bond also includes some dollars toward curriculum and technology needs as well. I think that the city and the school board together decided in 2012 to begin a series of bonds to do this work, to really make it so that our great city can have great schools. We can invest in the future of our city together. And this particular bond includes finishing up the modernization of each of the high schools so that every PPS student at one point during their school career can have the ability to sort of walk in on the first day of school to a brand new or newer building that has modern technology and working HVAC systems and so much more. Those of us like me who have our kids in schools that are in need of repair, I know that I look forward to the day when they can go to a brand new Ida B. Wells High School, which is one of the schools that is part of the bond package. The bond also includes Cleveland High School and includes some additional money in case it's needed for the Jefferson High School project, which will be the next one to open up for construction here in the near future. So I look forward to the discussion today, and I'm happy to hand things over to John to hear why he opposes the bond.
Okay, and your opening statement, Mr. Charles.
Thank you. I'd like to say, first of all, I'm not opposed to modernizing schools. I'm not opposed to a bond. I am opposed to this bond as it's too big, it's too expensive, it's too vague, and it's going to have a massive amount of interest that will have to be paid that will cannibalize the general fund for decades to come. As Christy mentioned, this is the fourth bond since 2012. So therefore, the district itself is really running on its track record. This bond is basically saying, trust us. And that's a problem because they failed to deliver properly on the 2017 bond, and they failed even bigger on the 2020 bond. 2017, they lowballed what it was going to cost by about $98 million. That bled over so that Benson wasn't finished, and that money had to go into the 2020 bond. 2020 bond had two headliner projects: fully funded Jefferson for $311 million, fully funded Center for Black Student Excellence for $60 million. Neither of those projects have been built. Shovels aren't even in the ground. In the case of the Center for Black Student Excellence, no one can even explain what it is, where it'll be, how it will operate, or any other details. Elsewhere, the school board demanded $120 million from the legislature in 2022 to move Harry Tubman Middle School for reasons not well defined. And here we are 3 years later, and that money hasn't been spent. And the district admits that there's actually no place to put Harry Tubman. So they have over $500 million in capital money that they haven't spent. In fact, according to the district's bond accountability committee, only 48% of the bond money from 2020 has been spent. So this bond is premature, and the district voters should vote it down, and then they should bring back a shorter bond or a smaller bond in November to reconsider.
Okay, and Mr. Charles, I'm going to let you continue with this smush on the question, which is, so is the measure necessary? Why or why not?
Well, I think, as I've told the board when I testified in June, I kind of pleaded with them, please keep it simple. Cleveland needs to be modernized. Wells needs to be modernized. If you put those in a bond and virtually nothing else, the voters will pass it. And if you put them in at a reasonable price, equivalent to basically what we paid for Lincoln. No, they didn't listen to that. Instead, they put this gigantic $1.83 billion bond. It's very vague. There's no commitments in the language. If you vote on it, you don't even know what you're voting on. So, as I said earlier, it's too big, it's too expensive, it's too vague. They made a strategic decision that was a mistake. And I think they should come back in the fall with a simpler bond to do two things: the last two high schools.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Split, for this one, is it necessary?
So I do think that the bond is necessary. I think that we have the work that John described from the 2020 bond still to do. It doesn't mean we're not going to do that work. We are going to do that work, and much of that work is in process. But we also want to continue to move forward on new and different projects as well. So I think the time is now, because basically, we don't have time to wait. I think about my own students. I don't think there'll necessarily be projects even in this bond for their schools. There is so much work that needs to be done, such a long to-do list that any delay sets us back. And I also think that having those funds available to do the work now gets us started on the projects that are most urgent. So I think that it's absolutely necessary given our aging infrastructure and the very long list of repairs work that we need done as well, and to make sure that we keep going. I also want to address some of the concerns about the past bonds. Only one of the projects has.
I am going to interrupt
I'll
you.
stop now. Thanks.
Yeah, and let you. Honest, there are questions that you're going to be able to answer.
So is it just 1 minute per question?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I thought it was 2.
That's okay. That's all right. But let me ask you, and we can continue. What is your assessment of the efficacy of the previous bond's oversight committee?
Yeah, so I just got appointed to the school board, for those who don't know, in January. And one of the first things I did since a bond had just come out is do a deep dive on the past and current bond. And that included getting an understanding of how the accountability pieces work. To me, it does seem like the accountability committee is the right place for this work to be done. It has the right members. They meet frequently. They review external audits that are done of the work. And as far as I can tell, they've found that essentially there are some things that could be done differently in each of those audits, but by and large, they think that the district is doing a good job of managing public dollars. I'd like to continue to improve that. As a board member, I plan to sit in on that committee. That's a commitment I've made, especially since the district I represent has one of the high schools. And so I can be there myself to continue to keep oversight and also make sure that we're following any recommendations that we get from the committee and from audits going forward.
And Mr. Charles, the Oversight Committee.
Well, I believe you're referring to the Bond Accountability Committee, and they're smart people. They volunteer. They do a good job. I have testified to them. I attended their meeting a few days ago, which was held at Lincoln High School. And I read their reports, so I don't have any criticism of them. But the issue is they're not a policy setting entity. I don't think their work factors much into board discussions. They're sort of window dressing. And that's something that the board itself can change going forward if they want to make the Bond Accountability Committee more useful, and I think they should.
Okay, let's continue for you. How accurate is it to characterize this proposal as a continuation of the existing bond?
Well, that's a claim made by almost every taxing entity that puts out a general obligation bond when they anticipate that the tax rate will stay the same. But that's really misleading. This is a whole new bond proposal. It's a debt obligation, and under general obligation bond rules, there is no ceiling. The people who loan us the money will get paid come hell or high water, and the taxes needed for that have no limit. So this is a new taxing obligation, and voters should think of it in that way, that this is going to be 1.83 billion plus a lot of interest, at least $800 million of interest.
Thank you. And Ms. Split?
Yes, so I think that for taxpayers, at least me as a property taxpayer myself, if the rate's going to stay the same and it's going to continue to go toward the same body of work, which is improving our schools, I feel that it is a renewal of the existing bond and part of that continued plan since 2012 to modernize our high schools and also do other work as needed to continue to get at the deferred maintenance backlog and other important projects that our school district needs. And that includes physical items like curriculum and technology that can be part of a bond, but also help to make up for the lack of investment from the state that our voters can help make up for in this case. So to me, I think it continues what's already in place and continues a plan that's been set in motion since 2012. And I feel very comfortable calling it a renewal.
Okay, so then I'm going to ask you, how is it different from previous bonds brought to the voters?
That's an interesting question. So one thing that I have heard and looked into myself because I came in just after this bond was voted out, is that it does have more flexibility than past bonds. And I hear John refer to that as being vague. To me, it's very clear that it handles the high school modernization, but it does allow for the district to have a process to figure out projects for deferred maintenance and for seismic upgrades going forward. I believe that process will start in June. And part of the reason we want to have that conversation is also looking at some of our under-enrolled schools and seeing if we want to continue to invest depending on what we're hearing about some of the neighborhood school enrollments. So to me, it makes sense to, instead of making that list before we have a full understanding of where we are with enrollment, that can help us figure out where to make improvements. I think it does make sense to have a longer process. So that is one difference, but one that I support.
And Mr. Charles? So is it different?
Well, it's different than what was envisioned in 2012 when the original financial plan was adopted. That plan anticipated regular bonds coming out about every 4 years in relatively small amounts. And that plan was abandoned pretty quickly. It went from 480 to 795 to 1.2 billion and now 1.83 billion. Also, the original bonds were more focused on capital construction, which is what a general obligation bond should be. This one has a lot of other intangible things, technology that's not really part of the school itself, and curriculum and deferred maintenance, and maintenance is not supposed to be included in a bond. And so I feel like there's been a lot of mission creep here, and the superintendent herself admitted at a meeting that curriculum and technology should be paid out of the general fund, which I agree. And so I think this bond, that's part of why it's gotten too big. They've been stuffing things in that shouldn't be in there.
Okay, The next two questions are going to follow along in this line, so let's see how we can dig down a little bit. Mr. Charles, to what extent does the board have the authority to modify either the project or the allotted dollar amounts in the bond measure?
Well, the board is the policy setting entity, and they should have done that back in January. The night I testified, January 7th, that was my message was legally you have until February 28th to refer this to the ballot. You have about 7 more weeks to massage this, and you should take that time. This isn't ready. And instead they rushed it out on the 7th, and then since then they've been having all kinds of conversations which by themselves were useful, except that they're too late. It's once you refer to the ballot, it's already done. These conversations that they've had lately about cost cutting, et cetera, would be fine if we're talking about a November bond, but they're too late and kind of meaningless for a May bond.
Ms. Split, what do you think?
Can you re-ask the question for me?
Sure. To what extent does the board have the authority to modify either the projects or the allotted dollar amounts, I'm sorry, not allotted, allocated dollar amounts in this bond measure?
Thank you. So I think in some cases we have wiggle room, but that wiggle room is within categories. And again, this goes back to, I think, just a fundamental disagreement that John and I have about how flexible it's acceptable for a bond to be. So while we can't, for example, there's $1.15 billion set aside for modernizations, and that includes possibilities at Jefferson, Cleveland, Ida B. Wells, and elementary and middle schools. We wouldn't have the ability to change that $1.15 amount, but within that 1.15, we do have flexibility. And so that also includes the $269 million that's set aside for deferred maintenance. We have the ability to be flexible within that category amount. We just have some categories within there. So I actually think we have a good amount of flexibility to make changes going forward, but not to those big category headings as mentioned.
All right, so then let me try this one, which is a current argument, that if the bond proceeds are not used for the renovation of the 3 specified high schools, that the proceeds can be used to renovate and update older middle and elementary schools? Ms. Split?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
So that's exactly what the board has been doing since John testified on January 7th and I got appointed a week later. The board has been very actively working on cost containment of the high school projects so that we can take remaining dollars and put those toward elementary and middle schools under that modernization bucket. And then as a reminder, there remains to be physical facility improvements under that bucket of $269 million. That includes other projects that can be done at elementary and middle schools as well.
And Mr. Charles, want me to repeat?
Well, the flexibility is it's a mixed blessing. The 2020 bond says specifically $311 million to fully modernize Jefferson and $60 million for the Center for Black Student Excellence. That money cannot be swept into some other use or some other account. And so the 60 million for the Center for Black Student Excellence is still sitting there. And I urge the board to put that in the bond, the current bond, to say, okay, we admit we made a mistake. Please give us permission to use the 60 million in some other way. They didn't do that, so it's still there, and there's still no plan to spend it. So they've responded in the current bond measure by being less specific. There is no specific allocation for specific schools. I guess they like that, but it means the voters have less confidence in knowing where the money will go.
Okay, let's switch a little bit, Mr. Charles. Comment on the adequacy, in your opinion, of this bond's requirements of quarterly reports and audits.
Well, again, I have confidence that the Bond Accountability Committee has competent people. I've watched them, and they will report. And in the 2020 bond, they and another oversight group, in fact, took about $48 million of costs that were to be spent under the bond and said they're non-compensable and made the district pay out of the general fund. So I do have confidence that they can do that, but they're not a policy setting board. And in my experience watching the board, they really don't pay much attention to what the BAC says.
Thank you. And Ms. Split?
Yeah, thanks, John. It's good to know that you feel that way about the Bond Accountability Committee and the board's reaction to their work. I personally commit myself, like I said, to serving on it and making sure there's a bit better liaison between the board and that group. I think it's critically important, especially given the additional flexibility that the board has chosen to include in this particular bond, to really keep close tabs and to really look for those chances, like John noted, to make corrections and make sure that we continue to be solid stewards of federal dollars, which is a value that I hold deeply. I also really quickly want to mention that the Center for Black Student Excellence continues to be a topic of conversation at the board. I know that we're looking at possible property purchases, for example. There's been some press on that. And there's also been much work done, including a big fat book that you might have caught me looking for earlier that I know is in this room, that was put together on what that could look like in the future. So there is definitely work happening, but we'll get moving on that too. I think we're behind as well.
All right, let's try this one, Ms. Split. Some opponents of the bond contend that the request for this bond is really for 3.5 billion in new taxes over 32 years. What is your response to that argument?
Yes. So the way that bonds work is that it does include paying for interest. That is absolutely true. It's how all bonds work. And this is the case, or I mean, bonds for this particular type of use. I realize there's other type of bonds in the universe, but in this type of bond. And paying for interest is part of that. We do have higher interest rates right now than we did during our past bonds. We all know that we've had increased costs due to inflation since the pandemic, and I share concerns with a lot of folks about increased costs going forward, given kind of current federal leadership and the direction that the economy seems to be taking in response to some changes with tariffs, et cetera. So interest is included, and that is part of the deal. Yep.
Mr. Charles.
Well, all during last year, the outside consultants for the board were doing modeling of interest rates or interest payments under different scenarios. In December, they modeled possible interest for a bond of 1.8 billion in principal. They estimated either it would be 800 million at the low end or 1.7 billion at the high end. I have never heard the board say what they think it's going to be. I've sent a public records request in last week to this point, haven't been answered yet. So voters should know that if they vote yes on this, it's going to cost them over several decades, perhaps 3 decades, at least 2.6 billion and probably more like 3.5 billion dollars. It all comes from property taxes.
Okay, and to make you feel all better, this is the last question. So, Mr. Charles, what are the consequences to the district if this measure does not pass?
Well, I think it would be a good consequence. It would show the board, the voters are paying attention, and that the failure of the board to finish the projects, or in some cases even start the projects from 2020, have consequences. But even more important, it would give the board a chance between now and August to fashion a much smaller, smarter bond that could be put on the November ballot that, in my view, would do at least 2 things: money for Wells and for Cleveland, but not for 1,700 students, because those students are probably not going to exist. And the schools could be great just for a smaller number of students, and take care of those families that have been left behind in the last 10 years.
Thank you. And Ms. Split, what are the consequences if it doesn't pass?
Yes. So the consequences if the bond doesn't pass. First of all, I just want to go back and make clear that the current bond and the whole plan includes the payment of interest. I just want to make sure folks don't think this will be like an additional piece that they'll have to pay. But going back to your question, The risk of the bond not passing is that rather than continuing the momentum that we have, and we have gotten a lot of great projects done, and only one so far, Benson, has gone over budget and was delayed. The rest of them, once they've gotten started construction, they have been completed within the time allotted and within the budget allotted. And so I think we have a great track record, and we want to keep going with that momentum of modernizing and repairing our schools. Like I said before, any delay I think is bad news. And I also want to respond to the concern about building the high schools too big. 1,700 is a maximum capacity, and the ideal capacity for these are around 14 to 1,500 students. When these projects are complete, particularly Cleveland and Ida B. Wells, which are the focus of this particular bond, they will have that many students when they reopen in a few years. So I just want to make sure we don't build too small for the students that we have now.
Okay, we come now to the closing statements, and these are 2 minutes. And Ms. Split, you'll start us with your closing, please.
Yeah. So like I said in the opening, I think it's so important that a great city has great schools. In some cases, it's really frustrating as a parent in Portland Public Schools that we can't control the amount of funding that we get for day-to-day operations at our schools. The state continuously has underfunded education since the passage of some ballot measures in the early 1990s. We've fallen short of a quality education model that leaders in the state put together each year to demonstrate how much money should be going to our classrooms. Where we do have control is in passing bonds that allow us to have school facilities that are the best that they can be for our kids. And anyone who has spent time in our public schools knows that many of them need work. I've taken public school students into schools that are new and modernized and heard them ooh and ah. This is true at Fabian, at Lincoln High School now, at other high schools in the suburbs for a longer time. I think every kid deserves to feel invested in, and this is a chance for our community to invest in our kids, to invest in the future of our city, and to make sure that we're continuing to move forward instead of allowing essentially the pandemic and the issues that have happened in our city since then to hold us back from that future that we can have together. Thanks so much for listening. Anyone ever has any questions, I can be reached at csplit@pps.net. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Charles, your closing.
Well, Julia Brim Edwards, a longtime board member and activist, said not too long ago that of all the bond measures she's been involved with, this is the only one that had no stakeholder committee. It's had the least amount of public participation, the least opportunities for public input. And I agree, that's a scathing indictment. The board has failed there. I also suggested to the board last summer that they figure out why Beaverton High School ground was being broken in June for a new school, 1,500 students, for $253 million. And the Portland schools are being proposed for above 450. I said, well, what does Beaverton School District know that you don't know? And to the board's credit, they did hire a consulting company, Cornerstone Management, to look into that. But when the bond was referred on January 7th, the board hadn't even seen the report yet. And they referred the bond. And then 2 weeks later, they were discussing what was in the Cornerstone report that they could learn from. Well, it's too late. Their due diligence was completely backwards. They should have reviewed the report, learned something, cut some expenses, and then refer out on the 28th. And I think it's symbolic of the problem here, lack of due diligence, inability to make tough trade-offs, and everything in a budget is a trade-off. So I think there's just been a failure of process and of critical thinking and of substance in this bond, and it should be defeated, and a smaller, smarter, more defensible bond should be referred to the November ballot. And if it's done properly, I would support it.
Hey, my thanks to both of you. I appreciate both your participation and all the information that you've been able to share with everybody. So thank you. Watchers and listeners, please share this forum recording with your family and friends. We all need to be informed voters, and we know this is a complicated issue. This recording and other information about this and other races on your ballot are available online at lwvpdx.org, as well as on vote411.org from now through Election Day, which is May 20th. Some voters may be able to vote on another measure, which is 26258, And that measure would authorize bonds on behalf of the Mount Hood Community College District. Information on that ballot measure can also be found at vote411.org and at the League of Women Voters PDX website, as well as in the Multnomah County Voters Pamphlet, beginning on page 74. I feel like a teacher giving assignments here, but anyway, it's on page 74. Ballots will be mailed to all registered voters starting April 30th. That's this week. As with all Oregon elections, it is mail-in. Ballots are due by 8 p.m. on Tuesday, May 20th. Postmarks do count. Make sure your ballot is postmarked, although no postage is required, by Tuesday, May 20th. Or find a drop box location near you by checking vote411.org or your county voter pamphlet. If you wish to vote in person, check your voter pamphlet for information on how to do so. The League of Women Voters is a nonprofit membership organization. We hope the forum was meaningful for you. We welcome you to join or contribute at lwvpdx.org. Thank you for watching and listening. Please be an informed voter. Please remind everybody else to vote, and you yourself remember to vote because your vote does count. Thank you.